right, what's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of This Week in Review. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited, and I am joined by
Jerome Bourgeois, co-founder, co-creator, Movers Shakers Unlimited. How's it going, man? Been a busy day, knocking out all these
right.
live shows, man. We're like a one-stop shop.
Of course, for sure. And thanks to all of you that have been keeping track of the episodes. As you well know, this weekend, as was alluded to, we have a Comic-Con at home happening this weekend. So the virtual edition of Comic-Con, if you will. And because of that, I made the decision to do a sequel series to SDCC Peeps. That I had last year, and I'm now doing SDCC Peeps Volume 1. So Brandon's SDCC Peeps. So stay tuned for that, as we have other guests that will be joining us later on this afternoon in a couple of hours, as a matter of fact, as well as a few other guests joining us tomorrow. So, make sure that you're keeping it locked on our social media as we announce, those guests that will be dropping in. Now, with that being said, it is also Saturday. So with Saturday, as I said, comes This Week in Review, covering many of the news bits that have made the rounds across the entertainment industry. So with that being said, I want to hop into a couple of reminders, a couple of minutes, if you will. Don't forget, if you are checking out this show live, that you can, of course, drop your comment or provide any questions as the show is happening live. However, if you catch it as an archive episode, make sure that if you want to still be a part of the conversation, that you are using that hashtag TWNRMNSU. So that's This Week in Review, Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And also, if you enjoy the content that we provide, make sure that you make it a point to drop over to our Patreon, as we do have a Patreon link, and we have some cool features in that are available for those of you that would like to provide that support for a lot of the content that we do. It, based on how, things have been happening this weekend, as well as, on a, it happens here and there occasionally on with the equipment that we have. Sometimes things happen and we kind of have to pivot and still try to make things work. The show must still go on, and a lot of that equipment that we use is not cheap by any means. We really try to make an effort to, have some quality shows for you guys. So if you so choose and want to be a Patreon supporter, by all means, check us out. With that being said, let's hop into the first story that made the rounds. And I want to comment on a story that was shown via Variety, but it's a show that we ourselves, are pretty familiar with, seeing that it happens here back at home, and that is the Kennedy Honors. So this week, news came that we had quite a few impressive figures that would be recognized at this year's show. We have a singer, songwriter Joni Mitchell, a singer actor Bette Midler, Motown chief Berry Gordy, the SNL creator Lorne Michaels, and the opera singer Justino Diaz, who will all be honored at the Kennedy Awards, which will take place at the end of the year, so in December. So you hear this, Jerome, what are your thoughts on having, each of these impressive, iconic folks being honored by the show?
Yeah, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for our 23rd episode. So going strong. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool with the Kennedy Center Honors, honoring not just artists and comedians, but also like the executives and the people who scout the talent. Because, it's true. Most people I would think know. I wouldn't completely say everybody knows Berry Gordy's name like that, but really, if you know about anyone in the music industry, anybody really talking about Motown, like his name is synonymous. But
The Last Dragon, folks. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, but come on. The roster that he signed is like almost unmatched. Only I'd say I think Clive Davis is probably the only other person who's neck and neck him and Berry Gordy are kind of like, even like Diddy said, like in that Clive Davis documentary, he looks at Berry Gordy and Clive Davis as like the top A&R / execs in the music industry for just all the talent they signed. It's just ridiculous. I mean, with Berry Gordy signing, Jackson 5 and Smokey Robinson and Stevie Wonder. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's just I mean, what is it? I keep going down the list. I mean, Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Temptations, Gladys Knight and the Pips. So anyway, and these guys are like legends, megastars. So the guy, I mean, so it's nice that they're recognizing the person who found all this amazing talent, and what's it called? But not only him though. I mean, Lorne Michaels. I mean. Name a great comedian that didn't start from SNL. I mean, there are some. That's true because I was a big fan of Living Color. Jim Carrey and the whole Wayans brothers. But like, come on,
Eddie Mad Murphy. TV too. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
We'll get into it, but
we get into it. But like SNL, yeah. I mean, come on, like almost every generation of super comedians that become comedians who become superstars. Like a lot of times they found their footing at SNL. They got their start there. So I mean, and for SNL to still be around, even though I probably was more of a fan of like In Living Color, and I mean Mad TV I saw not as much, but the fact that SNL is still around and like it's still relevant, and he's Lorne Michaels, he's still behind it. I mean, you can't take that away from him. So it's good to see him get recognized, or just how they're recognized. Like I said, the executives or the people who created some of these shows and scouted and found talent. And then of course Joni Mitchell, Bette Midler, Justino Diaz. I mean, it's a mix. So I think it should be cool. It's funny. It's one of the few events in DC that like it's tough to get credentials. So it's like I'm gonna see. We'll see what happens. We'll see if we can maybe get in there. But otherwise, I mean, that's DC, we have our own versions of honoring artists. So it's interesting that they have these big execs getting awarded and honored. So
yeah, I mean, you were commenting on the kind of just the list of accomplishments that many of these guests have. I mean, and thinking of Bette Midler, one thing that immediately comes to mind, and because it was so much part of my childhood, is Hocus Pocus. So like, just thinking, I know obviously, there are far many other projects and things that she has been a part of, but that was a major one. Being a 90s kid, and those of you that were 90s kids, and a lot of those family films that came out, during that time, that still, it's amazing that still has that cult following, that film, and it's still, going strong and people still enjoy it. So, that comes to mind, as I said, thinking of The Last Dragon and the music, like not just the action, the various, one-liners from a lot of the characters, and even the music that, is so synonymous in my head with, with that film. And I know you say you haven't seen it yet, man. We're going to have to fix that. You're going to have to see that movie.
I'll watch, man. Look, there's still a lot of old movies I got to watch.
We're going to fix that.
All right, okay. Put me on the spot.
We're going to fix that. We're going to see that.
There's some classics you haven't seen either, too.
Yeah, but yeah, we want to fix that, man.
It's all good. I'll watch it.
But such a fun film, and just in general, it's always great to see anyone being recognized, for their work. I know a lot of times on the show we talk about how sometimes that's not recognized, or sometimes why there's a need to have that recognition, or to have that voice, or folks to be able to be seen. And so anytime you have a platform where we're able to look back on a person's body of work, is always an awesome thing. So it'll be cool to check that out. As I said, it's happening on December 5th, but apparently in terms of its broadcast more than likely happen or hit next year. So just to have that in mind for those of you that want to check it out. All right. So with that being said, switching gears to the next story. This is a cool one. Again, going back to being a 90s kid, and many of those things that I enjoyed growing up, and that is, of course, Legends of the Hidden Temple. Many of you guys out there, if you remember that game show that was on Nickelodeon, it is actually making a return, a reboot, if you will. And we have an original from that series returning as well. So voice actor D. Bradley Baker, who many of you perhaps know from many different shows, whether it's Animaniacs or American Dad. I mean, those are the ones that come to mind immediately for me. He will be reprising his role as Olmec on that game show. So if you guys recall, that stone head that was talking all the time, and it was kind of, I guess you could say, the figurehead of that show. Whenever they show any footage of that show, or if they show any pictures of that show, that's one of the main things that allow that recognition of that IP or that show. He will be making a return as the voice of that character. So, Jerome, what are your thoughts on hearing this news? I know you said that you didn't really watch that show that much, but at least in the context of a lot of times when we hear about reboots, typically they scrap everything and they try to do everything brand new versus going back and still reaching out to some of the original folks a part of it. I mean, yeah, you'll see like characters perhaps make a cameo, but to like legitly have them a part of what they're trying to do with the reboot, I feel like doesn't happen a whole bunch. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, I'm not as familiar with that show, and but I do know that this guy, he's done so many voices. So I mean, the guy is really talented especially as a voice actor. So yeah, speaking to what you're saying, yeah, about bringing back someone for a reboot. I mean, I think it's always important to do that, maybe for certain characters as an homage, or a tribute to that original character or that voice, or maybe people grew up with. Kind of kind of reminds me of the Transformers movie, how they used Peter Cullen did the voice of Optimus Prime. So that's good that they did that, brought him back. But what's it called? I know sometimes they make that change, that they'll change it out. So it's always nice to see that the people who are creating the who created the original story, or fans of the original IP, or are making that tribute and making that homage. Because sometimes you got to remember where the original source material came from, and you got to always pay your respects to the people who came before you, and had maybe did something back in the day that you're influenced by, and especially if you're trying to reboot it. So it also kind of reminds me of like the Mandalorian, like how Jon Favreau, he took extra time looking at every type of Star Wars show or character, and he put it in there. And I think he went to George Lucas. He was like, yeah, remember that special, whatever, that weapon that he used? I used that. And I think George Lucas is like, what? I don't even remember that. Or something like that. So that just shows, like, if you're a true fan of something, and if you get to work on a version of something that you love, maybe back in the day, and then you try to bring in, always try to, have some of those nostalgic elements added to the project. So sounds good.
Definitely. And with that being said, switching gears a bit, I wanted to be able to follow up a story that we had discussed not too long ago, and that dealt with the resources that were being provided to California. So we have a follow up to that story, and it basically, if you recall, that 330 million. The 330 million in funds that were being provided to the film and TV industry was actually signed by Newsom this week. And let me pull up that story to get into more specifics of it. But yes, as I said, in the story of Variety, Governor of California, Gavin Newsom signed a bill on Wednesday that provided an extra $330 million for the film and TV industry, and it carries an incentive, which I want to get into as well, incentive to be able to promote diversity on set. So while the bill includes $150 million in tax credit aimed at promoting the construction of new sound stages, it also has a stipulation in it, and let me see if I can pull it up here. That was really interesting. It says there's a soundstage provision that includes a requirement that productions hire a workforce that is broadly reflective of the diversity of California's population. So you hear this news because the reason why I want to get into that, they said in terms of the breakdown of various, let's see, what was it?
Yeah,
Taken from
of
Latinos, 4.7
4.7
of Asian Americans. So like the fact that they are really driving hard, this their push towards diversity and actually implementing it in there. What are your thoughts? I think it's great, but maybe you think differently.
No, I agree. I think it's a good idea, and it's great that they're doing this. And then they're trying to compete with Georgia and I guess maybe any other state, New Mexico, and some of these other states. I know Florida for some also had some tax incentives. But yeah, I mean, let's face it. I mean, the harsh reality is a lot of movies and TV shows are just not being shot in LA anymore because it's just more expensive. So it's good that they're having these incentives. So they're going to have more productions being shot there, and then also, I guess they have these incentives for the soundstage constructions of sound stages, but also the diversity part is key. I'm glad they put that in there because, if you look at those percentages, that's way below the state's population for both of those groups. So that's great that they're doing that. I think also, it would be nice also if they said but also that's for, what is it? I think that's like in the union. That's cool for people that are below the line and whatever. That's more job opportunities. But I'd like to see some. I don't know. I haven't looked into all the details. I'd like to see them having like incentives for, like, if you're a minority producer or writer or director, maybe giving some tax credits too. So that also would help. That also would be an incentive for studios to make those hiring decisions. So it's all good for progress, and it's definitely necessary. So we'll see how it goes, and it's definitely going to bring more production to LA. So, and but I'm also sure that this is, like I was saying before, it's the timing too, because there's that recall that they have in California. They're trying to recall Newsom, so he's doing everything he can to show why you shouldn't recall him. And I'm not trying to get political, but I personally don't like the idea of being able to recall someone in the middle of their term. It's like, that's why you have elections. You want to vote for someone during election season, the election time. So, but yeah, it's he's definitely ramping up production. He's going to be ramping up a lot of production in LA and getting more people to come back.
For sure. And like I said, the big thing here is, and this is another talking point of what we've covered on the show before, and that's the idea of, kind of putting your money where your mouth is. It's always great to have different facets of an industry that is in need of it, to be able to have additional resources, because we have been talking about, and of course, obviously, there are a lot of things going on in the world. However, in thinking of the industry and how many lives are behind that industry and who it supports, and not just thinking of the actors and the screenwriters, but all those crew members that work on all of those shows, those TV shows, and them being able to support their families. It's so key in being able to keep that industry alive. And so it's always great where, yeah, you were providing funds to the industry, but the stipulation is like we need to also push towards ensuring that we're also having, you know, minorities being able to be represented among those that are part of a part of that force that helps the industry as well, and that we're more that we're pushing more towards the way our world is today and how it looks today, and really striving towards that instead of, you know, talking about it, actually, you know, putting yeah,
Be
be
about
about
it.
it. That's the best way to go about it. Yeah, for sure. So with that being said, going on to our next story.
One thing I'll add
Yeah,
on. One thing
go
I'll
ahead.
add.
Go
All
ahead.
right, is that I'm curious to know if, like, say Georgia or another state is going to be like, oh, we got to give more tax credits now. So, hey, if there's going to be a bidding war for states to try to bring in more film production, that's great. I mean, then filmmakers will have more options. I'm just hoping that they have there's more options for like independent filmmakers or something, or say you have like a lower budget. I mean, like I said, I haven't read all the details or whatever, so there might be, but it would be nice to see if they have more of those types of incentives too, for not just the big studios, which I get because they're going to bring a lot of money anyway, and that's a lot of jobs. But I mean, if you have a micro budget, say you had like, you know, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 to make a movie, whatever. I mean, if you shoot that in someone's state, regardless, and you're getting tax incentives, that's still helping the economy. So it'd be interesting if they have if there's anything like that that comes to fruition. I'm just interested in stuff like that because, you know, obviously I'm an independent filmmaker, so it's definitely helpful to save as much money as you can to make a movie. So, but this is good though. It's a step in the right direction.
Definitely. And with that being said, a lot of times over the course of the show, at some point, it's a given. We're going to get into some superhero news of some kind with one of our stories. So, with that in mind, the story that came this week was information regarding the the Batgirl film. Excuse me. So the in the Heights of Star. Let me bring it up real quick. But yes, Leslie Grace has been tapped to headline the Batgirl film. You hear this news, and to have to secure an actress of her of her talent, but also to really, again, kind of touching off of our prior story of having, you know, really going in an unexpected way in terms of what you have with casting and picking a minority for that role. And what are your thoughts on that? Because I love that they're going outside the box, and what we you know, folks would picture they would have for Batgirl, and actually go in a different direction.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I mean, but at the same time, now I'm not really surprised because if you think about it, if they're going to use the same, you know, Commissioner Gordon from The Batman, that's Jeffrey Wright. So it works.
True that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. I'm happy for her, Leslie Grace. I mean, come on, she was great in The Heights, and that definitely put her on the map. And now it's great that she's getting other opportunities from that movie. And I mean, to my knowledge, I didn't really read the Batgirl comics, but I mean, of course, I remember, you know, the series, and then the you know, obviously the animated series, and then of course the movie, you know, with Batman and Robin. But
Alicia Silverstone,
yeah, Alicia Silverstone played her, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I don't remember her being Latina ever in the comics or anything. I haven't seen that. I mean, I know that Catwoman, obviously, she's been a white character, but also played by Black actresses. I mean, you had Halle Berry, you had, I forgot what's her name in the Adam West version, but yeah, like they've switched up, you know, Selena Kyle, so that's cool. But for Batgirl, I haven't seen that, so I think that's pretty big. And this is, I mean, this could be it's an HBO Max movie, but still pretty big. I mean, the guys who directed, was it Bad Boys for Life? They're directing it, so. Right. But I just realized, yeah, it's like I wasn't even thinking about the connection to The Batman, but I'm sure that she's gonna have there'll be she'll probably have a cameo in either that movie or the Gotham HBO series, because I'm sure they're going to connect it somehow now, because I was like,
Okay, and I was looking through there.
it wouldn't make sense otherwise.
The idea is that it will be towards that, because initially when I was thinking about it on paper is that they were going to try to make it towards their I guess you can call it their DC universe, their Prime universe. But I know that they were saying with the Batman that it was going to be a separate universe to kind of explain that difference that they have between the Batman. So I was trying to look through the story and see if that's the way that they're going. But I mean, with that casting, it would make perfect sense that would be the universe that they are tying it to, versus having the complication of trying to tie it to the DC Prime universe, which has gotten really complicated in terms of how they've had their connective tissue between their films. So that probably would be the best way to go, is to make it a part of what they're doing with the Batman. Since if they starting.
I'm only saying it because of that. I know that they're doing that show with Jeffrey Wright, so
right.
It only makes sense. I mean, I don't see. I mean, I'm sure that discussion had to have been made, because she's obviously. I mean, they're both great actors, and it's good to switch it up anyway too. I mean, for those characters, as long as you get the essence of the characters, and it's it makes sense. And I mean, I wasn't that familiar with Batwoman and all those versions of Batwoman, but like, look, you see on CW, I mean, they're doing, I mean, they had, they switched that character up. So, and that's great. I mean, why not? You don't only have to have a dude, an old white guy dressed up as Batman, even though he's obviously the OG Bruce Wayne, and we have several versions of him. I mean, you could, they haven't really gone in depth with, a live action version of Batgirl. I mean, we've seen her in the animated versions, and I mean, slightly in maybe that other version, was it? But like the Adam West version, I think. But yeah, it's it's they definitely have a wide canvas to fill in and make it her own. So yeah, I'm excited to see. And also because on HBO Max, I'm curious to see if they're going to take more risks too. Maybe it might. I don't know if they say anything about being rated R, then I don't know, but I feel like HBO is taking more risks when they're releasing stuff on just HBO Max, like Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yeah, that was
in general. Bringing up that point, they're taking risks, because I mean, Suicide Squad is going to be rated R, so like exactly. they aren't going to be. One thing that I will give them credit for going forward with the upcoming slate of films that they have is that they have not tried to handcuff their filmmakers with the content that they're doing in their respective films. If it needs to be rated R, they have been willing to make it rated R. And so like, it'll be interesting with the Batman and considering what I understand a lot of what the story beats are and what they're dealing with and the content, that may potentially be rated R too. And I have no problem with the rated. I have no problem with a rated R Batman film. So
I want to see a rated R Batman. I want to see a rated R X-Men movie too. So, I mean, that's Marvel, but why not?
So if there is anything that you can use in order to separate yourself from your contemporaries, that's one thing that I can definitely say, at least recently, with what DC is doing, is that they are they're opening up and being more willing to not go the standard PG-13 route. And there's nothing wrong with having a PG-13 film. Many of our superhero films are PG-13 and they're awesome films. However, at the same time, if the story demands, for you to go a little darker or a little more violent, to be able to effectively tell that story for that character or the story of that film, of whatever's happening in that film, then, it is what it is. Like, in order to be able to effectively do it. I don't know if considering what I know about, Suicide Squad, and I'm not going to get into spoilers about that. I haven't seen it yet, but I already knew who the villain was. Considering that, like, I could not imagine, considering what that character can do and what they're capable of, how to effectively tell that story and what their abilities are in a PG-13 film. Like, I understand wholeheartedly why it's a rated R film. If anyone has seen, James Gunn's horror films like Slither or any of those, I have a picture that's probably how he's gonna kind of approach what he's gonna do with the villain in the Suicide Squad film. Again, I'm not gonna spoil who it is, but
just watch the trailer.
Watch the trailer, you'll see. But even though that character is pretty goofy, like,
yeah, I know.
you could do it almost as a horror film in terms of what that entity, that thing is capable of. So, so it's cool to hear this news and to see that they're not really going WB, that is not going in a tried and true direction that many folks would expect, but going in a different direction with what they're doing. So, any final thoughts before we move on to our next comic book oriented story?
No, I mean, I totally agree, because it's like sometimes it just boggles my mind where like some of these movies are like not originally R-rated, and I'm like, I'm glad they're doing that more, because it's like, I'll go back to X-Men. I mean, of course that's PG-13, but like once they started making a Wolverine movie, I'm like, you cannot tell me that a guy with claws coming out of his knuckles is not going to be an R-rated movie. I mean, come on. How do you think he kills people? I mean, that's not PG. It's just not PG-13. It's like
whenever he attacked anyone, there was no blood or gore.
What's funny though is like watching like the animated version of X-Men. You're like, yeah, Wolverine does what he can, but you never see. You're like, this guy has claws, but it just doesn't make any sense. You're like, how is he killing people? And he's this secret weapon. But anyway, it's the same with like Deadpool, and then of course Joker, and I mean, even with Suicide Squad, I guess they also learned their lesson with the first one. They're kind of like, all right, we need to be more accurate. And I mean, come on, Suicide Squad's called Suicide Squad. I mean, if it's called Suicide Squad, that some people are gonna die because they're criminal. Like, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not even about like, the money will come if you you do it well, you do it right. People will watch it. Like The Matrix did really well. I mean, I look at Deadpool. Yeah, Deadpool surpassed that, and then Joker. I mean, these movies can make money. People will go see them. It's just do it right, So I'm not saying Batgirl has to be rated R, but it'd be interesting to see if
the story calls for it. Then and I wouldn't have an issue with it being rated R. Same thing as I said with Batman. Like,
I think Batman definitely should get, because if you really think about like,
especially if you him at what I'm saying, even him as if they're really diving deep. I know one thing that Matt Reeves has been commented on saying is really diving into him being a detective. So if you're doing all that forensic stuff and you're doing like a procedural like that, and having that type of element or that type of format, like it's not going to be pretty. Like, it's going to be violent. It's going to be like disturbing. So like if that's the case and that's the direction that you're going, and the story calls for it to be rated R, then make it rated R. So
the story, and then also just some characters inherently, I'm like, to me, there's just some characters like you really can't get around it, and it's just laughable to me when they try to PG-13 certain characters. I'm like, yo, come on, just think about what the dude is doing. Like I said, I go, and like Daredevil's another one, But yeah, there's plenty, and Punisher, of course. Oh man. Anyway.
For sure. But so still staying in the realm of superheroes, but switching gears.
This one too.
Yeah, right. Switching gears from the world of DC over to Marvel, to the MCU, if you will. We had news this week that our MCU Blade film has found its director. So yes, in a story that was provided on Deadline, it was revealed that Bassam Tariq, I apologize if I'm butchering your name. But Tariq will be helming the MCU Blade film. Now, if any of you out there remember a couple of years ago, I know in this show I was telling you that we have been talking about Comic-Con. So like the last in-person Comic-Con we had, which was in 2019, I was fortunate enough to sit in the front row of Hall H, the very front row, be able to take in the MCU slate that they had, and to be surprised or shocked by the news that we would in fact get a Blade film proper in the MCU was pretty exciting, and to have it headlined by none other than Mahershala Ali, who, you know, thinking of his prior work in the MCU was awesome. So I guess we could say that maybe he has a different appearance in the multiverse. In one universe he's Cottonmouth, but in MCU proper, in the main universe, main timeline, he is Blade. So with that being said, Jerome, and considering the anticipation of what the possibilities are with this film, and now to have the reality, now that we have a helm, we have a director in place. What do you think?
I will also say this goes back to my philosophy. I mean, I know we were kind of disagreeing a little bit. I don't know why, but I'm telling you, there's another example of Marvel also hiring someone who's just getting their career started, and like they're gonna make this guy, like, this is gonna make his career. So because he's done a film with Riz Ahmed, Mogul Mowgli, and he did well. Yeah, he had a Sundance documentary, These Birds Walk, and that's it. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like he's just getting his career started. So this is kind of in line of what Marvel does, and that's great, and it's a win-win. And he's the sixth person of color to direct a Marvel film, which is amazing. I mean, when you have Ryan Coogler and Chloe Zhao, Dustin Cretton, Taika Waititi, and Nia DaCosta, who's going to do the Marvels movie, the sequel to Captain Marvel. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, this guy's Pakistani. So yeah, I mean, I haven't seen his film that he did with Riz Ahmed, but obviously it must have impressed Marvel executives, and his pitch must have been really a really interesting take on the character. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's always good to get a fresh take on a character, and I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm curious to know if like Wesley Snipes is going to have any involvement. Maybe he might have a cameo or something. Who knows? But if not, it's okay. He's given his blessing. But I would like to see how hardcore they go with this. And this also adds on to our last conversation. I mean, obviously Blade, he's inherently an R-rated character. I don't know if they're going to go R for this, but you never know. They might. I mean, they're continuing with Deadpool in R-rated fashion. I mean, like they should, because it's already successful. And I'm sure Deadpool is going to be connected somehow to the MCU. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with this, but I'm not saying they couldn't make a PG-13 version, but I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know, Blade, I mean, he's killing vampires. So I mean, I don't know. Like and those Blade movies that's a high bar. At least the first two. I mean, I like the third one still, but the first two were like, I mean, it's horror action. It's a horror action film. So,
well, here's the thing. Here's a way that they could get around it hypothetically, because they, and the only reason why I know this is in listening to, I enjoy listening to director commentaries, and a lot of times they'll talk about, in many of my favorite ones, how they've been able to get past, the rating system. And a good example of that was the film AVP. So for those of you that remember, what was it? It came out in 2004. Geez, it's almost 20 years ago. But yeah, so like in that film, Paul W.S. Anderson was commenting on how they were able to bypass a lot of getting hit with that R rating. And one of the ways that they were able to do that is because they were able to kind of rationalize that it was creature violence versus, human violence. So, maybe in terms of how they portray their vampires in the MCU, they're going to be so unrecognizable as human beings that they will be able to rationalize some of the violence that is done to them, and maybe even the blood, because that was another thing too, because of the blood being green, with the aliens and the acid blood with the, between the predators and the aliens, like the different colored blood that they have, that is distinctly not human. They may try to do the same thing with their vampires to be able to rationalize the amount of violence that is in that film. And so like any of the major violence that happens won't necessarily happen between vampires and humans. Like the most that will happen is that they're bitten, but outside of that, like decapitations or having, limbs cut off will probably happen with the vampires, like solely just with the vampires. And then with the vampires, they may give them a different color blood, maybe, just
No,
to be
I
able
get that,
to have that make sense. But no, I get you, because
but
that
that's not what I'm
original
talking
Blade,
about here.
man, that original Blade film, those first two Blades were awesome. So like, and I mean, we know what happened later, but I'm just saying,
I still
like,
enjoyed the third, but yeah, it just wasn't as good as the
but I'm
first two.
just,
It
yeah,
wasn't
they
as
just
good
weren't
as
as
the
good as the
first two.
first two. So like
I think I
those
probably
were
like the first one.
awesome
But yeah.
installments, and they are hard R films. Like there's no way with those stories that you could get past making them PG-13 in any shape or form. So how they will be able to fit that into the MCU, I'm very intrigued and interested to see how they pull it off. But if there is a way to do it, that might very well be the way to do it. And in thinking of like the original actors, it's, I know we were talking about reboots before and how sometimes actors make cameo roles. I always said it would be awesome to have Wesley Snipes be Whistler.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
To have him be Whistler in essence, in a very meta fashion, passing the torch as the Whistler of the universe that is training Mahershala Ali's Blade. That would be really cool. And then to see some other characters go back. Donald Lowe, who was Quinn in the original Blade, man. Like, I've had him on the show a couple of times, and it'd be great to see him, go back into that world of vampires. I know he's always, discussed with me how much fun it was to do that original film. And he said he would be more than willing, more than open to do that if the opportunity came.
Luke Goss, Ron
Luke Goss, but I
Boucher,
mean,
right?
I don't know if everyone will be invited based on how recent events have happened with Steven Dorff. I won't get into. You guys can look it up.
Oh yeah,
but you
well,
guys can look that up.
Anyways. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can look that up.
True.
I won't get into that really, but I'm sure everyone else would be game, and they would also be invited to be a part of it, and it would be cool to have them come back in some type of shape or form. So yeah.
My only thing with your point, like I get what you're talking about the creatures, but I mean, because that's been happening since Gremlins. I mean, like they put Gremlins in was the first one where they put a gremlin in the microwave and exploded, and that's the movie's still, I think, PG or PG whatever. I think it was PG. But if that was a baby, then yeah, now it's R-rated, but because of gremlin. But I'm not talking about that part. That part is fine. Like that's known, but you can't tell me that you're gonna have a vampire movie with vampires not biting humans. Like, you know what I'm saying? So that's my issue. Like, I'm like getting around that. I mean, you can cut away all day long. That's true. They could figure that out, but that's why I'm saying, like, the essence of a vampire movie, it's probably going to be difficult in that sense, because how are you not going to show the threat of how dangerous these vampires are to humans and not show what they could do to them? Of course, all the really hardcore violence could be against the vampires. Yeah, you could be chopping them up or whatever, and they turn into
well, that's
dust.
what I mean. They can still
but I'm talking, but still, biting humans. I mean, some of those stuff. I mean, there's some things that they do to humans so they would have to limit that, I guess. But and then cut back on the language, because I mean but that's what I'm saying. To me, like, that's what made Blade. Like, I don't know. I just feel like you wouldn't do that with Deadpool. Of course, Deadpool was made prior with Fox, and then they're not going to mess with what didn't work. But still, like, come on, like, you could have Blade, you could have the darker characters mingle with each other more, have some crossovers.
Well, I always said this, like, once the rights, MCU got the rights back to Blade, I had always said that in order to be able to do it the way you want and to have the freedom to do it the way that you want, I feel like it will work better as a series. I know we had it as a series before, and it didn't really, like, didn't really hit the way people expected it to. But to be able to do that type of content, I feel that there's way more flexibility to do that as a series. on a streaming service than it would be as a film where, the pressure is there to really to kind of I don't want to say water it down or water down the content, but you have to have it be, attractive or draw all types of audiences. And a lot of times, in order to do that, you have to kind of a lot of things have to sometimes fall by the wayside in terms of slimming down that, as you said, of cutting back on some of the content or some of what's implied. A lot of it might just have to be implied. We hear a lot of sound effects maybe of it happening. And maybe, they are feeding on humans, but we don't see a lot of blood and gore. So like, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how they're able to execute it, or if they kind of cave and they make history of making, Blade the first rated R film. But I don't know, like we'll see, only time will tell of what they decide to do with it.
I feel like, I know we can move on to the next one. I just feel like I don't see an issue with making solo movies R-rated or whatever. Like, that's fine. But then when they cross over, it's like, okay, then maybe you make it PG-13. Obviously, you're going to make it PG-13 because you want more people to see it. But solo movie, I don't see why that would really be the issue if it's done well, So I see where the brand is, like obviously the brand of Marvel is pretty much PG-13, so I get it. But I don't see an issue with doing that and then go back and when there's a crossover film, make that PG-13. So I'm sure that they're gonna bring the Punisher back somehow and bring him in. It's like Punisher's not PG-13, so I don't know. Maybe he'll be in the you might team up with like the being like a Deadpool film, or maybe I don't know. Maybe there'll be something like that, or I don't know how they're gonna bring Daredevil. But maybe they're gonna bring those series back on Disney Plus in a darker way. I mean, or maybe like you said, the series, some of these series might be darker with certain characters. I don't know, but I don't see how that's really an issue if because people are going in expecting to see this type of film, and then all right, when they're with your more friendlier superheroes, you could make it PG-13, but it's premature. We'll see what happens when it comes out.
Definitely. And with that in mind, we'll switch gears to delving outside of the superhero realm, but still going into the house of Warner Brothers, if you will, and talking about a story that is pretty intriguing. And we'll close it off, with this week's episode, and that's the idea that it was announced by Warner Media's CEO, Jason Kilar, that there are going to be 10 films that will exclusively be done for HBO Max. So considering what we have, what's been happening this year, Jerome, of that kind of that dual release strategy that's been used between the theatrical release and HBO Max, what are your thoughts on hearing this news of it being exclusively for HBO Max?
Yeah, I just thought this was interesting because, obviously, HBO Max and Warner Brothers, they've had the success with their theatrical releases. And HBO, HBO before it was called HBO Max, they've had made for HBO movies. But they're usually specific for if it's like a biopic, or maybe it's a mini series or a biopic, whatever you want to say, however it's pronounced, or something that was really specific to the types of shows that they have on there. Because HBO, obviously, they were the pioneers, you could say, for the golden era of television with The Wire and The Sopranos and all these really amazing shows that are pretty much long form films, it shot in a film format, basically, like the most cinematic type of TV shows, and just started that trend. And then everyone else pretty much followed that. But I'm just saying this because this is Warner Brothers now producing 10 films exclusively for HBO Max. So it's not like, it doesn't mean necessarily these are HBO type of projects. So it tells me that they're really trying to force people to subscribe so they can watch stuff that you can't see anywhere else. Because even with the movies that they're releasing day in, day out, you can still watch them in theaters, or you can watch them on HBO Max. So it just tells me that they're trying to do, either they're really trying to compete with Netflix with having, exclusive content that is just going to be on HBO Max. And obviously, like we were talking about Batgirl, that's going to be an HBO Max movie. It's not a theatrical release. I mean, unless they change that somehow. So I think it's pretty cool, because I feel like it's going to give them more opportunities to take chances. And they're going to, make HBO Max more attractive to subscribe to, and, see all the different types of shows, and not only the types of shows and older films, but like specific new exclusive movies that you wouldn't see anywhere else, just like Netflix has been doing now. And Paramount Plus is doing that more, and obviously Disney. And the thing is, it doesn't surprise me, because, like they said in the article, if you look in there, it's like Netflix obviously is leading, Disney's coming close. Then it's like Viacom, CBS. You look in that chart, then you have Lionsgate, Discovery, and then it's like HBO Max, Peacock, Prime. So obviously they're trying to. I mean, they're gaining. I know they're gaining steam, but they still have a ways to go. So it's gonna be interesting to see what movies they're gonna pick just for HBO Max, and how are they gonna be developed. And I feel like they're going to be movies that'll probably take more chances, because they don't need to make money at the box office. So it's obviously specifically to get more subscribers and people to be paid, paid customers watching, for obviously so they could watch every month the different types of shows and movies they have on there. So I mean, they just want to pretty much retain their viewership. So if they're going to do like 10, if they're going to do at least 10 every year, or whatever the amount, that's another incentive to watch HBO Max. I mean, I already think that they're ahead of the game, thinking about doing this day. If they continue this day in, day out release schedule with the theatrical releases, because no one was doing that. And like now people are, I mean, there's hybrid versions you see with Disney and really Disney. I mean, with their $30 they're charging, but I'm like, I'm not gonna pay $30 to watch something at home. So, but it's true with HBO Max. It's like there's certain movies that I saw only on. I was like, I'll watch on HBO Max, but I don't want to go to the theaters. But like the Suicide Squad coming out, I'm gonna see that in the theaters, because I want that. But I could just stay home and be like, hey, I'm watching the Suicide Squad. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting just to see what kind of chances they're gonna take, and what kind of films these end up being, and if they continue doing it. And I want to know, are they going to? What I would like to see is, like I said, are they going to continue this same day release theatrically and on HBO Max in the meanwhile? Because this was like an experiment, so who knows if this is going to continue in 2022, 2023. But I feel like I kind of feel like it's here to stay, because if they're already seeing the success, they're going to. Why wouldn't they? And it's cheaper for promotion, because that's been the problem with these longer 90-day release windows theatrically. That it's been cut down now to 45 days, and it's going to probably stay that way for most studios with their deals with these theater exhibitors. But the main reason why the studios wanted that is because they didn't want to have to keep paying for promotion, marketing, and promotions later on, because it's like they got to do another campaign later. It's like, why, when you could just promote it, it's in the theaters. And then now it doesn't do as well, or does okay, whatever. Now it's going boom, straight to your streaming service. You're done. You don't really have to be like, oh, let's do the DVD campaign or whatever. It's definitely been something that I know they weren't a fan of, and now they have this opportunity, and I don't think we're going back. So, but this is something. I think it's gonna be interesting. Seeing all these different new models that we're getting from different companies. So. It's something to look out for.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with, a lot of those things that you touched on. And the only other thing that I will say this is that it basically just carries over from what I was saying, before when we were talking about Blade, and just that idea of providing another avenue for a filmmaker, screenwriter, to be a producer, to be able to have another avenue to tell their stories, because sometimes, very much so, when it comes to having a film play, and kind of having to adhere to a studio and their notes and what they need in order to ensure that a movie has the maximum, or what they perceive, it's all relative, of course, but what they perceive is their idea of success for that particular film. A lot of times, all those parties that I mentioned, they have to make compromises in certain aspects in order to ensure that the film sees the light of day. And by having, this avenue here, they might still be able to tell the story in the way that they would like, because, there's a certain amount of freedom that you could have in having it play on HBO Max versus having it play theatrically. So,
Yep.
yeah, for sure. All right. Well, with that being said, guys, I want to thank you guys for coming on and watching this edition of This Week in Review. Before we go, Jerome, any final thoughts, and if you could share where folks can find you, man.
Yeah, you can find us. You can find me at JW Bourgeois 21 on Twitter and Instagram, and definitely like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube. Was it YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook? So on YouTube, Movers Shakers Unlimited. Also, we have a Patreon account if you want to if you're a super fan and you want to just support our content. You go to patreon.com, Movers Shakers Unlimited. On Twitter, like you just had up, yeah, we have it's Move and Shake UNLTD, and also on Facebook, Move and Shake UNLTD. Definitely check out the rest of our our episodes covering Comic-Con, and we've been at it all day, so there's a lot more stuff to share, man. So you can take it back, man.
Yeah, for sure. And just as you was saying, yeah, we're still in the midst of doing a Comic-Con at home. So, if you didn't have a chance to see some of the episodes, they are currently up. However, there are more on the way and many other announcements to be made. So just be mindful of that. There is more to come, and more to enjoy. That will be posting not just to our YouTube, but also to our Facebook as well. Other than that, I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Choi ENT, which you can see down below. You can find me at Brandon Choi _ENT on Instagram. And other than that, guys, thanks so much for watching again. Be safe out there, and see you soon. Peace.
All right. Peace out.